working as a men's counsellor for over a decade. I worked in different areas, from men in separation to parenting and to men's behavioural change programs. Even if we look at it specifically, I think you need to take a broader picture. And what we see is men struggle in regards to asking for help in regards to their own health and well-being. And so if you take that as a broad picture, that men normally struggle in that attitude about asking for help seeking, we call it, then you could imagine overlaying that with a disaster. So all of a sudden their normal baseline isn't great, it's not flash, and all of a sudden we now supersede it with this heavier end of experience, and it diminishes again. So what happens is men struggle to realise what it might be for them to actually seek help because of the stereotype that comes with being a man, or that the premise of being a real man. And so we see these pictures of men in thongs in no shirt battling a fire. Like, rather than clapping and going, wow, that's a man, I'd be asking the question, what was going on for that man to put himself into such a position that he thought shorts, thongs and no shirt was adequate? Yeah, I think that says it all. Like, masculinity is a trap for men. It also traps women and children, but from a men's point of view, it's not a great place. So how do we look at it? So if we go through stereotypes, or as we'd say, social norms, so what's an expectation? Well, we know when we don't see it. So, for example, I'll give you a lived experience. I was involved in the 09 fires. And at one point, I'd put my family and myself at dire risk. I said, no, we've got to go, it's coming in. And I remember there was a point there where my partner was straggling behind, and she said, leave me, just get you and our child away. And I couldn't. There was a part of me that said, I can't leave her. That's not what a man does. And so not consciously, I don't feel it was conscious, but in reflection it was conscious. I made a choice to say, no, we'll die together, because I can live with that. I know it sounds crazy, but that's how deep this stuff runs. You know, that I can make a choice to go, I would rather die than live with what I might live with, saying I couldn't save her and I left her, because that doesn't reflect well on me as a man. I think that comes to the core of it, to the heart of the matter. I see the damage that men create and commit, but I also see the potential of what men can be. And it's not to be a real man, but to be a man. And it's not, you don't get born into manhood. You know, just because I was born male doesn't mean I get to be a man. It's not a rite of passage. You don't turn 18, 21 and now you're a man. It's something that I have to constantly strive for in all my dealings, to be seen as a man. So no matter what I do, no matter where I look, be it in a work life, professional life, personal life, social life, being a man and being seen as a man, which is even more important, so to speak, it's hard to gain, but it's so easily lost. And so the pressures that come to men to be men is just overwhelming. Yeah. So I see the potential of men breaking through that, and what might be when men break through that social norm, that gender roles that we place to make us firm. Oh, that's being a man, you know. That I can't see the traits and attributes that could be stated as a feminine attribute or a feminine trait, and not own that in myself, because that's seen as something girly or weak. You know, that's so abhorrent to me. There's, strength can come in so many different ways. You know, strength isn't just a physical strength. I'm a big man, but I see my strength as in being a vulnerable man. Yeah, and when I express that to men, they're shocked and appalled. No, you can't be a vulnerable man. That's not being a man. Well, actually, let's have a conversation about that. Let's see where that's coming from. What stops you from being vulnerable? I've talked to men who haven't cried in 30 years. Can you imagine living a life that it is so restrictive that you're not able to participate in a natural act as crying. And so we have natural disasters where people are overwhelmed, where there's an opportunity to express all of what life's emotions are, and men are narrowed down. We can't show it. We have to be stoic. We have to be a man. Let's look at expectations for a moment. So there's an expectation placed upon me to be a provider. That runs intrinsic. If you speak to men, it's probably the top 5. Provider comes in very big core. Protector, big core one, yeah? Capacity to do. So men aren't that comfortable in being. We're more comfortable in doing. So where's the problem? Let me fix it. But what if the problem's too big? What if the problem's too vast? And more so, what if the problem is actually part of me? That I'm part of the problem as a man. So thinking in regards to not just hierarchical stuff, but when you look at the services that were involved in the disaster of 09, the fire of 09, a lot of those institutions are very hierarchical, predominantly with men. And so that's the template, you know. I'm more about having individual accountability. So how can I be accountable for me and my actions and let that wave through, let that transcend hierarchical disposition, yeah? So how do I, I'll go back to me, how do I work through issues like disasters in my own life? Well, one, I have to admit that I'm actually not in control. Now, I've built a life of actually saying, no, I've got control, you know, I can do this, I can do that, I can, yeah? And so when natural disasters come along, when nature comes along in such a ferocious way, men have to actually get challenged. Their belief structures get undermined. And so one of my core pillars, if you like, that I've driven down into being a man is that I've got control. Society tells me I've got control. I can walk anywhere. I can go anywhere as a man. Yeah? That's not true for everyone. That's not true for women. Yeah? And so here I am shattered, rattled, so to speak. How do I deal with that? When I've got such a core part of me saying, I'm in control, and that gets broken. So what happens is men try to mend it in ways that give them a sense of control. So look around you, and what a lot of men will do is they'll go, proximity comes into play here. So who's the most proximate? That's not really an English word, I suppose, but the proximity of someone, it's their closeness. So it might be that family and friends are the first port of call where they try to regain their control, where they try to get a sense of control back. And that's what I believe we see after disasters in families, particularly around the family violence stuff. They've lost control in some aspects of their lives. They need to regain it in some very tangible ways, and that usually imposes upon those that they love the most in not necessarily healthy or loving ways, you know. But because it's so important for them to be a man, that they'll do this in a way that gets that script, that story coming back to be true, even though it's putting power over someone, putting someone into a position that's not necessarily of their want or like, but it'll make me feel more in power, more in control. Yeah. We spoke earlier in regards of masculinity and how that's a trap. Yeah. And if we look again in the sense of, if I see myself as a man and I'm able to do what I can, I don't need help from other people and I can do it myself, and I'll withdraw. Yeah. So what are the ways that men can cope? Well, they're usually not that helpful in many ways, but we go to what we know. So it might be work. Now, if I go back to work, what I get is a tap on my back. Geez, you know, anyone else wouldn't have been able to do that. Aren't you a good bloke, Adam? You've been able to come forth. Yeah, and so I get propped. The prop's there, work. The avoidance technique. So, you know, we live in a culture, let's be clear about this, there's a very strong drinking culture in Australia, and quite a lot of accolades are given, particularly to men, around how much or frequency and what they can do after they've drunk. Yeah. So as an avoidance strategy, I can turn to drink, and I can wallow in that space. I can get into that space and hang out there, and not deal with what's going on, but smother, cover, push down. Hang on, I'm starting to get a bit fragile. I'll drink or I'll work. Yeah. So there's these sort of aspects in regards to how to cope. But what we don't see enough of, and it's changing, there are men who are doing it. And I think institutionally that's a big thing, like the police, SES and those services, they can bring that more into their workplace, that actually it's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. Normalise that. See, what worries men is if they actually go there because they haven't been able to